My name is Fran Florsheimer, and I work for UT Center for Healthy Aging. I am a geriatric social worker, and my specialty is Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. I do assessments, counseling, and whatever I can do to help this population and their families through this long process. By the end of this presentation, hopefully you will be able to utilize the information with your patients, and perhaps they will be able to teach us as we continue to mature. I do want you to know, though, that this presentation is rated PG. Alzheimer's disease affects more of our friends and families every day. I encourage you all to learn more and share the facts. And why is this important? Well, as you see from the bullets, there are many reasons why this is important. And everyone has a need for companionship and physical intimacy. People with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias are no different. So this behooves you to learn what I am about to present to you. Intimacy is a multi-dimensional situation. It has different meanings for different people, and it is very personal. Spiritual intimacy is something sacred in a relationship that is shared. Expressions of physical intimacy between two people can range from a handshake to a pat on the back, and between two colleagues, a hug, and strokes between friends to sexual relations when one moves closer towards the more intimate forms of expression. And there is a big importance of facing life together. I call this compassionate communication through the aging process. One must always remember the importance of facing life together as a family, as a couple, as an entity. So, what is intimacy and how do we express it? This slide is something you really need to think about in your own practice and in your own lives. Expressing intimacy has a lot to do with how we react to each other. Intimacy can be expressed in a number of ways. It could mean speaking with someone that you can trust with a private matter, someone who will listen and not give advice. Generations really differ in sharing innermost feelings. Members of the baby boomer generation, which we are talking about here, are more open to discussing and exhibiting their feelings. It's called a differing of attitude. I am sure many of you are familiar with this. Compare this with the older generation, such as our grandparents or even parents in some case. And what are some of the advantages of aging? We are all aging. I always feel this is one of my very favorite slides. Hopefully, this slide will help us process the ongoing cycle of life. Why? And why do I love this slide myself? It's so very personal. Because I can relate to it as it deals with my patients and my clients, who are many times older and wiser. Need I say more? I too am aging and continue to learn, as I hope you are also. It helps us identify the differences between intimacy and sexuality that we encounter. And here is another slide. This is beautiful, and I think this is very encouraging. I hope you feel the same way. So, is it true or is it false? I'm hoping that you view this in a very positive manner and find it true. There are many changes in circumstances, equal changes in intimacy. And the bullets that you are reading explain this very clearly. And something that you need to think about, how do you think this might affect the caregiver as well as the patient? Well, that's some intimacy changes. And this is all, again, in the bullets, which you can all see for yourself. But let's go over it. Intimacy, which is hypersexuality or decreased libido. Confusion about what to do or say. Lack of initiation or follow-through. Challenges recognizing the right time and place to express affection. That could be very embarrassing. Hygiene and self-care issues. These are all changes that can affect the closest of relationships. Dementia causes many changes. Let's go over this list and how to address it. Loss of social skills. People go to a restaurant and really have no idea how to behave because they have this terrible disease of perhaps Alzheimer's or some other dementing illness. Their inhibitions are lost, and this is very embarrassing to families. Their judgment is not what it should be, and they have poor decision-making skills. So we have to understand, as we read along all these bullets, that a person with Alzheimer's disease and any related dementias has a physical illness, not a mental condition. And then we can go on to our next slide, which can address some more changes. And these changes definitely cause a lot of risks if not addressed. If we don't address the issue, this is what might occur. You might be communicating with somebody, and you might be communicating with a person that just cannot understand you, or they can't understand you because you're giving too much information. Whereas when you're communicating with a person that has dementia, less is always better. And give them time to understand what it is that you're trying to say. And listen to them carefully. Effective communication with people that have Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia begins with the initial approach. A lower tone of voice, looking directly at the person to whom that you are speaking, using short phrases and constantly reassuring the person are just some of the approaches that will lead to effective, compassionate communication. Sex, don't take it personally. It is extremely important to realize the loss of sexual manners that occurs as a result of the disease many times, and not because someone has suddenly lost regard for his or her partner. This is certainly evident with persons in different stages of this dementia. The changes in the brain caused by the disease increase some people's need for sex relations, which may create conflict in their relationship with their partner, or perhaps it is expressed in an inappropriate place, manner, or directed towards a non-consenting person. And this can cause a lot of embarrassment, anger, and the person that has this disease is not conscious of the reason. So sex, don't take it personally. Every 67 seconds, someone in the U.S. develops Alzheimer's disease. As you read these numbers and how you have to care for the population and the changes, I find that this is awesome. This is frightening. This is the future. unless there is a cure found. But sexual intimacy is a basic human need that is often overlooked. It's overlooked by many people, and even in the medical field. It's overlooked in the provision of quality care, which is very sad. For example, persons with this disease and their partners have just turned a life over because of this. The interpersonal and sexual consequences of this disease changes customary notions and expressions of tenderness. This is very, very hard for family members to understand. And why is this hard for family members to understand? Well, there are romantic attachments. An Alzheimer patient can live in a world previous to the time they met their spouses. When an Alzheimer patient doesn't see their current spouse, they may relate to someone else that's in a nursing facility, or perhaps even in a restaurant. They are about present moment needs and expressiveness. And I repeat that. They are about present moment need and expressiveness. The attachments provide comfort, reassurance, and happiness, just as a former marriage did. The need for touch, that is so important. Adult children take these new attachments much harder than spouses. Just because this person's sexual expression changes doesn't mean that they don't need or require intimacy. The population still needs the affection in a non-intercourse format, such as touching, holding, hugging, kissing. You have to remember that everybody needs to be touched. Sometimes with this population, it's a good thing to ask permission if you're going to stroke somebody's shoulder or take somebody's hand or attempt to hug somebody. You need to get permission to do this. Is it all right if I hold your hand and just hold it because it's so smooth? Or I need to give you a hug because I care about you. And you will get the right results from something like that. But you really can't take it personally. So maintaining sexual functioning is related to age-associated changes, and we need to go through that. This is all self-explanatory, and I think we need to go directly to the next slide before we even start to think about this, because we need to know why is there age changes and what are the age changes. Well, what does change with age? With women, you have a lot of hormonal changes, estrogen, progesterone, and all what it says here. And for men, they have their own issues, which is erectile function changes, slowing. The needs are different, but the needs are still there. So once again, the needs to be discussed to help with addressing these issues. Spouse to spouse, physician to patient, family and or specialist if indicated, but it needs to be discussed. Because some of the possible effects could be with the spouse having a decreased desire for and arousal during sex. Intensity of orgasm lessens and inability to attain orgasm. With men, they have their own issues also. Diminished arousal or sensation. Intensity of orgasm lessens. They have an increased risk of erectile dysfunctioning. So these side effects can really hurt a marriage or just a relationship, because people don't understand. Again, there's the need for education. Also, what could cause this are some of the changes in health status. Therefore, education, professional help, and support is needed in dealing with this for the present and for the future. And how do we deal with it? We deal with it through as I just got through saying, education and speaking with professionals. Now, sometimes people that are in this mode of dementia or have very inappropriate behaviors. But we have to look at it this way. The behavior is not inappropriate just because we think that a particular behavior, such as masturbation, is wrong. If this person has Alzheimer's disease, we do not have the right to impose our values on the individual. We do, of course, have the right to ensure that the behavior occurs in privacy, not in the living room, or in the middle of the dining room, or perhaps at a wedding. Sexual behavior also is not inappropriate just because it is engaged in by the elderly, as long as it is agreed upon by two consenting adults. It has to be agreed upon by two consenting adults. And possible causes to these inappropriate behaviors could be absence of touching, absence of holding, and affection experienced in earlier or present life, desire for tactile stimulation or inability to control behavior due to the disease process. There isn't enough touch very frequently with these people when they either are at home or if they are in a facility. And I will go into that at another slide. So when families have to deal with difficult feelings, they're very angry and they go through stages of grief. And they're not satisfied, they're frustrated, but they don't know what to do about it. There is anger and resentment, but they don't know why. They want the person that they love to come back and can't get that person back. Occasionally that person comes back, but not often enough. There's a lot of guilt. Is this my fault? Did I do anything? There's going to be grief because of the loss of the person that was. There is embarrassment because they don't understand and cannot explain to other people what is going on with their loved one. There's a lot of loneliness because they too don't have touch. And they're missing the positive feelings that loved ones have with each other. And of course, the attitudes of adult children towards sexual expression. These things all have bad effects. And this is something doctors can't fix. A spouse once told me that I was working with, and I quote, "The most difficult thing is watching the person you once knew and loved all your life just disappear completely, leaving a total stranger in the body of your loved one." So here we are, the importance of communication. With a person with dementia, you have to speak in a different manner. You should use what we call the KISS principle, and that stands for keep it simple and sweet. There's a different means of communication with this population. They need touch, they need humor, and laughter is good for everybody. And validation of feelings and offering of support. This is good for the person that has this disease as well as the entire family. It's important that you get into the person's reality so they can communicate back with you, because many times in the later stages they cannot get into your reality. I'll give you a short example. During one of my assessments, I asked a client, who was my patient, what this is called, as I pointed to my watch. With perfect confidence and a broad smile on her face, she said it was, quote, a party. Now, normally that doesn't make sense to anybody. What does a watch have to do with a party, right? I told her that was just the information I needed, and she seemed so pleased with herself. I then engaged her in conversation about a party and asked her what party she would like to go to. And she told me she wanted to go to a party with her grandchildren, and she needed to be there at a certain time. And when she saw my watch that said 3 o'clock, that was the time of the party. But of course, I didn't know that at the time. But as we communicated and she talked more and more about this party with her children and then pointed to my watch again and said she had to go, I first realized what she communicated with me. And it was just a marvelous experience for me to get that understanding. So as the dementia progresses, communication can become more and more challenging. Sensitive, ongoing communication is important, no matter how difficult it may become or how confused the person might be. So, you got to choose your battles. Did anyone ever tell you that before? I know when my children got married, I told them everything can't be the way they want it. They have to choose their battles. And I guess my parents told me the same thing. So remaining calm and overreacting helps a great deal. Do not argue and do not try to use logic or deny the person's needs, and do not scold. Listen to the person. Attempt to figure out what has caused the outbursts. Could it be that the person is very, very hot and just wants to get the sweat off them? Could it be that the person needs to go to the bathroom but doesn't know how to tell you? Could it be that the person is so confused that they're wandering all around their apartment or their living room, and when you say to them, where are you going and what are you looking for? Could it be when they answer you, I'm looking for my family. I'm looking in this room. So they're looking for yesterday. So you have to bring them yesterday, and you can do that by showing them photos and talking to them about their past. If possible, try to ignore the inappropriate language and behavior and redirect the person's attention. Attempt to figure out what is causing the behavior. I remember a gentleman who lived in a facility that I was with. Every evening, he would come out from the dining room and would cause all kinds of havoc. His behavior was very inappropriate for the normal person. What is normal? He had outbursts, he would carry on, he would curse, and the nurses and myself and everybody else didn't know what to do. So I called his wife and I asked, what did you do in the evening with your husband? She said, that's a good question, because at many times he was very, very upset. And what we did was he sat in his comfortable chair that was a recliner. We gave him earphones with his favorite music, and the best thing he enjoyed was his pipe. So I said, well, thank you so much. And guess what? We made those arrangements to have all that in place the very next evening, and from that time on, he was quiet. So you have to really look into the background of a person and try different things. You can't find this written in a book. So what can the caregiver do? And this is not easy to answer. Family members must seek help from professionals and request direction, education, and interventions that might be positive and help both the family and the loved one. It's important for family members and caregivers to remember that you or they are not the cause of these behaviors. It is the disease process. However, through education regarding dementia and learning how to deal with certain behaviors and communicating in a positive manner might help a person better understand. Now, once again, all this is not easy. A family member must seek help from a professional and request direction and interventions that might help themselves and the family and good friends and the caretaker, which in the long run will benefit the person with dementia. It is our feeling that we must do and attempt to do what is in the best interest of our patients, our families, and how to help them all. Very often, spirituality brings a lot of help too, and I often offer that in recognizing a person's needs and directing them to the right people. So once again, you have to how to deal with the guilt, and you can't learn that overnight. You're gonna need counseling and help from others. Reach out to family members and good friends and to the clergy and let them know what you're going through. And these people will all be able to assist you. And you need to fulfill your needs always of companionship with emotional thank yous, intimacy, and spirituality. And intimacy doesn't always mean sexual intimacy. It very often means someone you could trust and be intimate with, that they will not laugh at you when you discuss your feelings. So now we go into some interesting facts about sexuality among older adults. And this slide tells a lot. Just the spread of sexually transmitted diseases, which has become a major public health concern in the aging community, is to most people unbelievable. But it is there. Because the majority of older adults are engaged in spousal or other intimate relationships and regard sexuality as an important part of their life. And regarding STD, many people are truly not aware of this, and nursing homes and assisted living residences have been aware of this for a number of years. Now let's go on to residential facilities and sexuality. And as this slide shows, an elderly couple are very engrossed in each other. And just look at the two fishes on the side, are equally swimming together. So, sexuality in residential facilities, yep, intimacy, not sex, is necessary for human survival. In residential care settings, there is probably too little intimacy rather than too much. I know you could all read this, but I have to say it over and over again. People do not understand that. So I'm going to try to explain that to you. The touch that a person gets in a facility is usually the doctor or the nurse coming to examine a patient and feeling for pulse, as opposed to taking someone's hand and shaking it, or saying you look beautiful, or you have such a strong hand. Whatever it is, they don't get that touch. So it behooves you all to understand the difference between intimacy and sex, and that the need to touch somebody is so very important. And sometimes you need to get permission to do that. But if you carefully go to somebody in a quiet way, they will be there for you. And this is a statistic which a lot of people are not aware of, but I must say to you, sex is here to stay, and age is just a number. I can attest to that in my many years of working with this population, both patients and their families. I can attest to this as being true. And as Nancy Mace and Peter Rabins wrote in the famous book 36 Days, sexual behavior in nursing homes certainly differ in significant ways from such behaviors at home. And this is so very true. Now, what's some of the inappropriate responses to sexuality? Well, all of the above, everything you're reading. Unfortunately, this all occurs in many facilities in Texas, and I'm sure elsewhere. Some examples that I have encountered, touching, bed sharing, etc., are handled very poorly. Somebody might decide, I have never slept alone, so I'm going to go into bed with this young woman or this young man, who in his mind or her mind reminds them of their spouse, who reminds them of when they were young. And of course, this is not always acceptable in facilities, and you have to learn how to deal with it, not by punishing anybody or yelling at them, but you have to be very gentle and at some point discuss it with their family, what's going on. And it is not something that can be brushed away easily. But the education for these facilities must be done on a regular basis. So some appropriate responses to what we're just discussing. Assess the resident's ability and capacity to consent before reacting to anything going on. Remaining calm and non-judgmental. Of course, you must respect the resident's rights to engage in intimate behavior and to privacy, and supporting residents' needs of interest in sexual expression. They must be consenting adults. Consenting is the operative word. Unfortunately, as we just spoke before, this is very much going on in other facilities around, and we have younger people going into facilities now because a lot of people have early onset Alzheimer's, and this is happening. So we need to talk more about it, and I will give you an example about this in a short while. So assessing capacity is something I discussed before. So what does that mean? It means, is the person aware of this relationship? Is the person able to avoid exploitation? And is the person aware of all the potential risks? Anyone working with this population needs to understand what capacity means. Regarding sexual expression in dementia, sex is not just for the cognitively intact. There are some considerations for the staff and caregivers. They need to know about the rights and safety, what the family preferences are, and all the other bullets. There's privacy barriers are existing also if they're not in facilities, living with children or in close proximity. Do they have the privacy, or is there embarrassment and confusion? Interruptions by staff if they're in a facility. So there needs privacy barriers. Some facilities have a do not disturb sign. Privacy barriers with the facility staff can't get access to residents' medical charts. And then also what's most embarrassing and what should not be is the fear of becoming the topic of conversation. So education is very important. Also, you have to figure out the culture of the community. Assisted expression of sexuality via, say, masturbation. Can it be talked about, or are people too embarrassed to talk about? Use of and excess of pornographic material. If somebody has their own room and chooses to look at this, who are we to say they can't, as long as they're in the privacy of their own room? Also, we have to deal with the homosexuality and also religious affiliations. All this has to be dealt with in an adult manner, with privacy. Then there's conflict of values of residents, of the staff, the culture of the facility, and the families that might be in conflict with what is going on. So there are 10 tips also to better communication, which I'm going to just read to you briefly now, because this appears, the communication is important all over. So if you're dealing with a person that is inappropriate sexually, in our minds might be inappropriate sexually, but in their minds it's not, because in their minds it's their loved ones that they are attempting to have a relationship with. But you need to be calm and supportive. You need to focus on feelings, not facts. You need to pay attention to the tone of the voice that you're using. You need to address the person by his or her name, whatever their preference is. You need to speak slowly and use short, simple words. Remember, less is better. Ask one question at a time if you need to. Avoid vague words and negative statements, such as saying, I went to get your sweater from your drawer. I couldn't find anything because it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. That doesn't work because they don't understand that. Don't talk about the person as if he or she isn't there. You talk to them because they are there and they need to feel worthwhile. Use nonverbal communication like pointing or gesturing. You know, you can, when you want to talk about something that they might not understand, if it's there, you point to it. Or use different gestures. Be patient, be flexible, and understanding. Some of the things you need to remember, that every facility needs to have a formal institutional policy, and you could read all this, and all staff should know the history of the past behavior and social relationships of their residents. Always try to preserve and respect remaining capabilities. You need to focus on what they still can do, not on what they can't do. And people with dementia continue on to need loving, in a safe relationship, caring touch, and expressions of intimacy. I know I've been repetitive in this, but this is not being done, and this comes to be very sad for the people that have this disease. Some solutions for this issue is on this slide, and it's very important that you all take heed to this slide. You also got to discuss openly with family, director of facility, and include the patient if appropriate. The education of the nursing staff is most important. You should also have a social worker present and involved. Once again, the two patients need to be consenting adults. And an example I can give you is something that just happened recently. There was a couple that got together in an assisted living, a male and a female, and the male was very controlling and demanding of the woman. And her background was that she loved men and she would go with them many places. And she was divorced, so she had many men's friendships, but not in the issue of sex. Once they wanted to be intimate, she shooed them away and went on to the next person. Well, now she's got dementia of the Alzheimer type, which is ongoing and progressive, and the gentleman has also got ongoing dementia, but not as progressed as the woman. And the two of them are a couple, and they are together, and it is apparent to most everybody that they are in bed with each other quite frequently. Also, the gentleman controls the woman by feeding her food that she shouldn't be eating and causing her to be sick, and that's what caused us to get involved with the situation. And the interesting part of this, there was a home meeting held with both families, and the families were not concerned about the intimacy at all. They were concerned more about the controlling issue of the gentleman and the fact that the woman was accepting this control and didn't even want to go out with her family unless she consulted with him first. And of course, he always says, I want you to stay here. So this was an interesting case for both the assisted living facility, for both families, and for myself as well. And we did come to an agreement, and everything has been worked out, or is in the process of being worked out, but we are all aware. And again, the two consulting adults was the real big question, and the main fact that I was there, that it was a medical issue, that she cannot eat certain things and therefore they should change the table, which is what they did. But you know, it didn't work because she decided she wanted to go and sit at that same table. So it was resolved to the fact that we addressed the issues. The assisted living facility will monitor it a little more closely. Both families were not very upset, and hopefully it will be addressed in a more positive manner, and the families won't look at it in a joking way. But these things happen, and we are part of it, what's happening. So now we're coming back to the second slide you're going to see again, which is the advantages of aging. This is all remarkable. Compare this to your teen years when you thought you knew everything, your 20s and so on, but life's journeys go on. So there is advantages to aging. I always say, I am now older and I am wiser. And as wine ages better with time, so do I. So it behooves you all to remember the advantages of aging for yourself as well as the patients that you work with. And I think the next slide really says it all. The need for intimacy does not disappear with age. This is so true. And our next slide, well, this should bring a smile to your face. And now in the end of my presentation, in conclusion, I would like to share something with you. I have a recipe to give you all for successful caregiving. And I hope you find it successful as I have found it successful. 3 cups of creativity is part of this recipe. 1 cup of patience. 2/3 of a cup of a support system. 1/3 cup respite. 1 container community resources. I think it's 12 ounces, 1 container. 2 to 4 tablespoons of love. 1/2 teaspoon of kindness. 1 heaping tablespoon of flexibility. A dash of knowledge and a pinch of humor. No preheating is required. All you have to do is combine the above ingredients, mix well on a daily basis, continue to evaluate the need for adjustments in ingredients. Measurements may need to be adjusted according to individuals' taste. I offer you the above, and I hope you have a successful experience. And now, in my conclusion, I'm going to read you a poem that is called Memories. The woman who wrote this poem was sitting with me in my office a number of years ago and had just been given a diagnosis of dementia of the Alzheimer type. And she was quite upset, and all she could think about was how her memories are going to be lost. So she sat down and wrote a poem. When she wrote the poem, she sent it to me as a gift, and it is still hanging in my office. And it's called Memories. I share it with you and hope you get the enjoyment and pleasure from hearing it as I have all these years. Our favorite memories are locked up in the corner of our mind, to be released or yet to find. The key to open up Pandora's box, to let the ills escape, to flow swiftly down the stream, and happy memories remain safely in our dreams. Our favorite memories are ever present in our lives. To remember our holidays of long ago and far away, we made a pact with pride and sealed it with a kiss. We remember our everlasting important events like courtship, engagement, and the wedding vows, and honeymoon, and many more. Do you remember holidays with a special meaning to dwell in your heart? Come day, come night, memories do not fade or die away. Memories are many splendid things that follow us all the days of our lives. As we close one door of sadness, we open the door of happiness in our memoir of yesteryears. We salute our memories. Thank you.